Today we are taking a look at stories that are not paranormal, but nevertheless as scary as any old ghost story. We tend to believe everybody else should be more or less like ourselves, with reasonably stable background, similar social and moral sensibility, and more or less sane. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. Encountering a person with a vastly different sensibility, illogical obsession, or erratic behavior can be truly disturbing. And to meet such psychotic one as none other than a girlfriend would be truly devastating. Now, I have to be fair, and these stories are all written from the man's perspective, and we don't really get to learn the full backstory of these women. They might very well be victims of traumatic experience, and what they really needed was a professional psychiatric help. But in the writer's shoes, I can also understand what terrifying experiences it must have been to meet these women as none other than girlfriends. After all, few of us have true understanding of psychology and human mind, and I would have been just as confused and scared as these men if I were in their shoes. So, here are 3 allegedly true stories about psychotic girlfriends. Enjoy, but I also ask you to take them with a pinch of salt and remain sympathetic for everyone involved in the story. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by host, Anthony. When I was a middle school student, PC방, internet cafes with fast internet lines, were just starting to take on in Korea. Online chatting was a fresh new thing. Some mates seemed to flirt with girls and even start a relationship via chatting, but I was honestly too shy to even drop a hi to anybody. But one of my mates was having his best time. He met a girl via chatting and he bragged about how cute she was, with long black straight hair and big round eyes. I'll call her Unji for the sake of the story. But my mate saw himself as a bit of a ladies' man and carried on flirting with other girls while he saw Unji. And one day she saw a message from another girl on his pager. Yeah, those were the days. And they end up breaking up after a quarrel. Her last word before parting was, "I'll kill you." But my mate didn't take it seriously. A rainy day, couple of months later, he was on his way back home. The street was nearly empty, and probably for that reason, my mate noticed a girl in a white raincoat walking after him all the way up to his apartment. He wondered if she might be one of the girls who had a crush on him or something, and gave a closer look. He could not see her face underneath the hood, but considering her tightly curled hair and fashionably out-of-trend puffer jacket, he concluded it couldn't be anybody he knew. So he nonchalantly hopped on the elevator, but before the door closed, he saw the girl in white raincoat walking in, holding a knife in her hand. Instinctively he pushed the close button desperately, and the girl started rushing towards. Only then he saw the face under the curly hair and hood. It was Unji. Fortunately, elevator door closed before she could get in. My mate's place was on the 6th floor, but he called 8th floor instead. Unji knew which apartment block he lived, but not the exact house number. At 8th floor, he got off and checked a staircase. It seemed quiet at first, but he caught the sound of very quiet steps. He hid himself on the 7th floor and peeped out. It was Unji, holding her shoes in one hand and a knife in the other, tiptoeing to the 8th floor. I remember him recounting this creepy experience to me at school the following day. I asked him if he did anything naughty to her that she should take a serious grudge, but he claimed they hadn't even kissed and that he had no idea. But we were young and thought it couldn't be something so serious. That day, my mate was constantly looking back and around on his way back home, fearing if Unji wasn't following him again. No sign of her anywhere. With a sigh of relief, he arrived at his apartment building and called the elevator. But chills ran down his spine when he noticed the elevator was coming down from the 8th floor. Maybe it was just a paranoia, but when the cabin arrived, he pushed the call button to the 8th floor, got off, and took the stairs instead with his shoes off. He didn't miss checking where the elevator was going, and when he saw it arriving 8th floor, he silently giggled childishly, amused to think how Unji should be pissed to meet the empty elevator cabin. Before he carried on walking up the stairs, he heard somebody walking down and hid himself. And there she was again. Curly-haired Unji was walking down the stairs with a knife in her hand. Having narrowly escaped the mad ex-girlfriend twice, my mate made a report to the police and gave all the information about Unji he knew, whereabouts she lived and which school she attended. Only later, he heard from the police that there was no one by that name in that school. But he naively thought it should be all right now that the police was involved. He light-heartedly came back home the following day. Just in case, he asked the concierge if he hadn't seen a girl with curly hair and big round eyes. What concierge told him was, about a month prior, a girl by such description brought him some snacks, saying she had just moved in to the apartment block. Many moved in and out in autumn, and he just assumed she should be one of them. The girl occasionally made a stop at the concierge's office with a snack or coffee, and that way they became in friendly terms. And one day, she pointed to my mate walking past and asked the concierge if he knew my mate's house number. And concierge, thinking she fancied my mate, gave her the house number. That meant Unji knew all the time where he lived. It left my mate shocked. He explained the situation to the concierge and asked him to call police if Unji came by again. A few days passed without a sign of Unji. On another rainy day, my mate was home alone when the doorbell rang. He checked through the peephole, and there Unji was glaring. She must have been watching and waited till his parents went out. My mate got scared and angry at the same time and shouted swears at her. But she didn't even flinch and kept glaring. In the end, my mate almost cried and asked why she was doing this to him. Her last word before turning away was, "This was your last chance, and you blew it." Again, for a few days, he didn't see Unji, but he wasn't himself already, paranoid that Unji might be watching him somewhere, somehow. That day, the elevator on his side of the apartment building was under major repair. The inhabitants had to use the elevator on the other side of the building all the way up to the rooftop and walk across to their side of the building over the rooftop. For that reason, the rooftop that was normally locked up was opened. So my mate took the elevator from the other side of the building. When the door opened at the 15th, the top floor, his heart dropped. Unji was waiting there. Fortunately, there were several old ladies present in the elevator, and she could just give a death glare. Noticing the strange glance from the old ladies, Unji took the elevator down. My mate ran down the stairs to get to his place. He couldn't be sure from wherever she might pop out. All he could think was to get to his place and lock up the door behind him. But when he reached 6th floor, she was waiting right in front of his apartment, all smiling. She was hiding her hands behind her back, but he didn't need to see what she should be holding. The moment she took a step towards him, he turned around and ran up the stairs, all the way up to the rooftop. Only then, he realized it was a mistake. Now Unji could be waiting from either end of the building. Which way should he take? Which one? Autumn wind cooled his sweat, and he was now shuddering uncontrollably, both with chill and fear. Just then, somebody came up to the rooftop. Was it her? Thank God it was the concierge. He ran to him and explained the situation. Concierge said he'd escort my mate to his apartment, and they took the stairs. But Unji was just coming up. My mate's heart skipped a beat. But with a concierge next to him, she wouldn't do anything, he thought. The distance closed in 3 meters, 2 meters. But then abruptly, the concierge grabbed my mate's arms from the back and subdued him. My mate turned his head to look at the concierge and met with his stern stone face. Something was terribly wrong. But before he could think, Unji was now right up to him with a knife in her hand. My mate kicked Unji and jumped up, knocking the concierge's face with his head. Sharp burning pain stung his thigh, but he couldn't lose a second to think what it was. He just ran and ran down the stairs with rapid steps following him from behind. All the way down on the ground floor, he met his mom coming back from shopping. Only then he realized blood pouring out from his own thigh and passed out. Fortunately, Unji was found wandering around the apartment block and arrested shortly afterwards. She wasn't a middle school student, but was already 18 years old and had dropped out of school due to mental issues. She apparently seduced the concierge and convinced him that my mate abused her in a despicable way and that she had to take revenge on him. Having survived such an ordeal, my mate moved to a different part of the town. I'm somehow grateful that I was too shy a boy to hook up with girls on internet chattings. God knows what kind of people are out there. After my military service, I needed to earn and save up quickly in preparation of a national certificate test. There were basically two options as I was after a high hourly pay, either working in the production line of a factory or waiting in a bar. Well, the latter was not as honest as the first, but less physically demanding. So, yeah. The bar I worked for was a typical low-end, shady kind of place. Interior was divided into small rooms, each with a table and karaoke machine. The reason guys come to this kind of place is basically to play and be served by girls. Unlike in the old days, such a bar didn't have service women as their own staff, but outsourced them from staffing agencies. And my main job was exactly that, asking the customers what kind of girl women they wanted in terms of age, looks, and service on offer, and contact agencies to send in suitable women. Obviously, it was important for my job to be well acquainted and keep a good working relationship with these women. After a few months of work at the bar, I got quite close to a few of them, and she was not only pretty and glamorous, but also pretty articulate and sociable. I'll call her Myung for the sake of the story. I vowed myself I should separate work and personal emotions clearly, but I was a young man then, and couldn't help but casually flirt with Myung over time. One slow day, the boss decided to wrap up a bit early and had staff drink together with the service girls, including Myung. While all the others got so drunk and dozed off, we too were the last people standing, and she kissed me. Believe it or not, it was my first kiss since I discharged from the military, and with the alcohol in my blood, I could not resist anymore. We ended in a hotel room. After sex, we had pillow talks, and out of blue, she talked about suicide. She showed her wrist, which was usually hidden under the watch or bracelets. There were at least several slash scars. Apparently, she grew up under abusive parents and ran away from home at an early age. I myself had not an easy childhood, so I could relate to her story easily. Then she took out a bottle of pills, medication for her depression, which she'd been suffering for a few years, she told me. So, since that day, we became not quite lovers, but certainly more than just work colleagues, lunching out or going to cinema together, etc. Myung was really charming, sometimes showing surprisingly naive side too, except for occasionally off moments. She often said how she loved babies and puppies, and had images of babies or puppies up on her phone too. But then one day, when we were out on the street together, we saw a little toddler walking past in his squeaky shoes. And she said, "Wouldn't you just want to rip his legs off and toss away?" I was caught by surprise by a totally unexpected comment. She quickly said, "I'm joking." Problem was, Myung dropped such uncomfortable jokes occasionally. One day we were lunching out together. She excused herself to the toilet in the middle of the meal, and she wouldn't come back for almost an hour. I got worried and asked the female staff of the restaurant to check out the ladies' room for me, but she came out with ashen face and rushed to the owner. Turned out, Myung had swallowed a whole bottle of her antidepressant in the toilet cubicle. Seeing her conversing with white foams in her mouth was shocking. She was brought to the emergency. As I had to go to work soon for the evening opening of the bar, I called Myung's roommate. A big fat woman turned up, and I asked her to call to keep me updated. After finishing the work half-heartedly, I called up Myung's roommate. I was baffled by the message that the number wasn't in service. I ran to the hospital, but Myung had left already, and she wouldn't answer my call either. I didn't know where she lived, and she didn't turn up to the staffing agency either in the following days. Myung just disappeared like that for a couple of months. One busy evening at the bar, Myung came to work. "Hey, where have you been? What's going on?" I asked. "Huh? I'm fine. Which room should I go in?" was her nonchalant reply. I was baffled with her acting as if nothing had happened. But that evening was really busy, so I just had to get on with my work. A couple of hours later, I ran into her again, coming out from toilet. She abruptly held on to me and bursted into tears. "I'm pregnant," she said. I had the shock of my young life. We had sex barely 3 times, and I made sure to use protection every time. Facing her crying, "What am I to do? My poor baby!" I had no heart to say, "But I used condom all the time." I gave her a bottle of water and told her that she didn't need to go back to the room, that I would call in another in her place. When I returned, she wasn't there. With a terrible sense of foreboding, I rushed to the ladies' room. From the inside, I could hear water at the sink running at its max. I prepared myself for the worst and slowly opened the door. There she was, in front of the mirror. Her face reflected on the mirror was almost a caricature of a mad person, with her mouth spread ear to ear and her wild eyes rolling to side. "Should I get rid of it? Shit. Fucking baby. Whenever she retched, her eyeballs bulged out from her wide-opened eyes. I just quietly closed the door. I was honestly too scared to face her in that state. I just went back to my work, pretending I had seen nothing. After the business hour, I found her calmly having a smoke, cross-legged. "Still busy? I'm starving," she said. I didn't know what to say. "Shall we get something to eat when you're done?" I just wanted to run away. "Why aren't you saying anything?" I took a deep breath and finally said, "I think it's best we don't see each other again. Please don't contact me again." "You son of a bitch! What about our baby?" Myung said. I was just dumbfounded in such a cheap soap opera-worthy situation. I think I just ran away. I asked sick leave for a few days from work, and Myung didn't contact me. When I returned to work, my boss took me to a side and told me about Myung. Myung used to work in a different city. She was already notorious from there for her erratic character and bouts of depression. She also flirted with numerous waiters and staffs from the bars she worked for and said all sorts of different stories to them. That she used to be a trainee to an idol talent agency, but she could not continue because her family went bankrupt. Or that she won a jackpot from lottery and promised to start a new life. Or that she had a rare blood disease. Her story changed all the time, except that she appealed how poor girl she was and how tragic her life was. I don't know what her problem was and why she had to put on such acts, but it definitely left me more cautious and serious for the rest of the time I worked in the bar. It's about my ex-girlfriend. She was pretty, easygoing, and an all-around perfect woman for me. But barely after 2 years since we started seeing each other, she went mad, and I had to break up. Last Friday, I heard she died. Killed herself almost a year ago already. Our mutual acquaintance who passed on the news said she seemed to have suffered a long-term depression, but I know what she was truly suffering. 4 years ago, we went on a weekend trip to celebrate the first year anniversary of our relationship. After the dinner with some soju, we thought to go to 노래방, karaoke bar. We asked the owner of the restaurant if there was one around there, but she said we'd have to go out to the town. We gave up and was on our way back to the holiday cottage, when we came across a 3-story building we didn't notice earlier. It looked more an unfinished building, and not a single light was on, except for a pink neon sign pointing to the basement, reading 노래방. It looked dingy and shabby, but maybe that was because it was in a small seaside village. We decided to try it out, but inside felt odd. The front desk was empty. In fact, it seemed nobody was there. While the building was new, the interior seemed strangely old too. I was about to call out, "Hello, anybody?" But girlfriend hushed me. She was intensely looking towards the room number 3. I looked there following her gaze, but I could not see anything. Girlfriend walked straight to the room number 3 and opened up the door. She then turned her head to me and said, "What are you doing? Quick, come over! A mother is kicking her baby to death!" It wasn't the outlandish claim that gave me the chill, but it was my girlfriend's smile as she said that. Whether it was true or a prank, she should have looked shocked or frightened. I shouted to quit it and that we should get out of there. But she said with another smile, "Come, help her killing off the baby," and disappeared into the room. I ran to the room, and my girlfriend was kicking and trampling over the empty sofa, yelling, "Die! Die! Die!" I dragged her out while she was still kicking in the air. Only when we got out of the karaoke bar, she went limp. I carried almost unconscious her back to our cottage. A few minutes later, she woke up calmly as if from a nap. She didn't seem to remember anything. After the trip, I couldn't shake off the strange chill about the whole weird incident, but girlfriend behaved perfectly normal, and I finally put it aside after a few months. But I should have noticed how she was getting thinner all the time in those months. She was always worried and obsessed about her weight before, so I just assumed she was on a diet. But one time when I happened to meet her after a 2-week-long business trip, I was struck by how poorly she looked. Her face was almost gaunt, and lips were so chapped that they were cracked here and there. I told her whatever diet she was on, she should stop it right away. She smiled awkwardly and said, "I've been actually suffering nightmares and sleep paralysis since our anniversary trip." The reason she was poorly was the recurring nightmare and paralysis, apparently. She explained what they were about, and it brought back chills to me too. "In the dream, I'm trampling on a newborn baby, shouting, 'Die! Die!' And there's a woman behind me watching it all. I can't make out her face clearly, but I can still see her lips smiling. And then I would look at her with the same kind of smile, never stopping kicking the baby. When I wake up from the dream, I find myself paralyzed. And then I see my room door opening, then something rushes in with quick steps and jumps on my belly. I can't see what it is, but I can tell it's glaring down on me. I could see how she was frightened. And then it starts jumping on my belly. And as it jumps, the light from the outside shines on its face, finally revealing the crushed face of the baby I was trampling on earlier. Its whisper gets louder and louder until it rings right in my ears. It says, "Stop breathing, you bitch." The nightmare kept gnawing away her health. In the end, she quitted her job and decided to go back to her parents in the other province. For her last week before moving, I stayed at her place, hoping to do whatever I could do for her. But I was only made to realize the extent of her problem. On the second day at her place, I was coming back from work with various food to boost her energy. As I walked up the stairs, I heard her voice. Coming. Was she waiting for me already? But what soon followed was a chilling cackle. "You're coming too," she said, and ran over in loud steps and slapped my face, shouting, "What are you doing? You leave the baby crawling up!" I freaked out inside, but got hold of her shoulders and told her to calm down. "But who's that woman? Don't let her come!" was what she said the next, and started throwing the food I brought to the invisible target behind me. Following evening, I tried to watch a movie together, and in that short moment of black screen between the production company logo and the opening of the film, I saw the reflection of my girlfriend, pulling her hairs and looking up the ceiling. Die! She screamed and grabbed a knife out of the kitchen and stabbed and slashed the empty space. I managed to snatch the knife off from her and locked her in my arms as hard as I could. "I should have killed it at the karaoke bar, then none of this would be happening," she angrily shouted. She remembered what happened on our trip then, after all. I was getting tired dealing with her such psychotic episodes and nightmares every day. One day she was out to meet a former work colleague. In that rare moment of peace, I fell asleep. It was tapping noise and unpleasant sense of foreboding that woke me up. The room was dark, but soon I froze to see the naked silhouette of my girlfriend. Cackling like a maniac, she was crawling around on all fours, seemingly trying to catch something. Then stopped for a second and then rushed out of the room. Die! I'll kill you if I see you again! Something snapped in me. I followed her out with inexplicable sense of rage. But before I could shout anything, I was left baffled in silence to see a pile of hairs and nails and drips of blood everywhere. Girlfriend had pulled them out herself. I broke down with tears, feeling totally helpless. On the 7th day, her parents came to pick her up, and I was helping to pack up the last bits, when I found a notebook stuck between the bed and the wall. It was her journal, or more of scribbles with no dates. Call me a coward, but when I finished reading it, I couldn't conjure the heart to see her again. According to what she wrote, she started seeing them for 2 days prior to our anniversary trip. As she came out of the shop in preparation of the trip, she saw a woman whose face was hidden under a hat and a 3-4-year-old looking child. Girlfriend could not remember, but they looked familiar. They too seemed to recognize her and sneered at her. And they were around the whole time during the trip, at the train station, in front of the holiday cottage, and at the restaurant too. And since then on, Girlfriend found them around every day. They weren't nightmare or sleep paralysis, but what she actually saw day to day. Every night she would try to trample and kill the baby that later crawled up on her belly, and a strange woman would be watching her from behind. It got much worse while I stayed with her. The woman would whisper in her ears, "Shall I kill him too?" And since when, Girlfriend also saw a man on top of the woman and baby, watching them all from afar. In the last few pages, she scribbled down in hectic handwriting, "I remember now. It all comes back bit by bit. I remember where I saw them first, where I gave a birth, where I, blinded by fear, trampled and killed the newborn. The woman is me, and the baby is mine, and the man is the dad of my baby who killed our baby together." I saw her going in her parents' car and didn't contact her again. I heard just occasional news from our mutual friends that she had a car accident and broke her ankles. Apparently her biggest complaint about the injury was that she could not kick and trample anymore. I suffered panic attacks and depression a while later myself. I don't know what is the full truth, if my ex really killed a newborn baby or not, if what she saw was all but her guilty-ridden hallucinations or not. I've never told what happened to anybody around me, and honestly, I just wish I could forget it all. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and I hope my portrayal of the women in today's stories was not too cartoonish. It's not easy to play an extreme character, even if it's just a couple of lines. Fortunately, I haven't met anybody so mad in my life as yet, but I have a keen interest in human mind and often observe how a traumatic experience or social repression can distort a human mind, however in a subtle way. Have you ever associated with a truly weird characters yourself? My focus was on Girlfriends today, but in the future there will definitely be more episodes about strange people in the workplace as random strangers. If you enjoyed my video, please give it a like and a comment, and why not subscribe to my channel if you are interested in weird and mysterious stories and an unusual peep into Korean culture. I'll come back next week. Until then, stay safe and take care.